Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Janish and I am the Product Marketing Manager at AppViewX. AppViewX is a global leader in the management, automation, and orchestration of network services in brownfield and greenfield data centers. We help NetOps and SecOps adapt to changing technology and process demands such as Agile, DevOps, IoT, cloud, and software-defined infrastructure. Our topic for today is private key protection in the age of heterogeneous data centers. This topic will be presented by Murali Palanisamy, our customer evangelist. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll bring them up at the end of the presentation during our Q&A. Now, without further ado, I'll turn the mic over to Murali. Hello, Murali.
Hi, Janish, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. All right, we're going to talk about private key protection, especially in heterogeneous data centers. So we'll go into details about the heterogeneous deployments and how heterogeneous applications are protected today. I mean, there's a challenge in managing the digital assets across the board. So if you look at industry, right, and there is a huge explosion of growth in digital transformation, right? Especially when we look at digital transformation as a whole. Just in 2017, there was a huge 17% increase worldwide. And if you look at the enterprises, majority of them are now focusing on hybrid deployment with some sort of cloud, at least one or two cloud providers along with their in-house data centers. And this seems to be the trend going forward. And we see less of born in the cloud type of companies, more of, at least now, more of hybrid companies which have some sort of private data center applications, and then cloud data center deployment as well. And we also see a huge explosion in HTTPS traffic supported by Chrome. And what was traditionally a clear text traffic for web is getting secured even more as we move ahead with the increase in the processing power on the end devices and also on the server side. So if you look at the use cases of digital assets, there is an explosion on the SSL TLS side, and there is a huge increase in the user certificates and mutual authentication where you validate the end device. And there is also adoption on the S/MIME and then email signing and document signing with the compliance and online way of doing things. And mobile is another area where there's a lot of changes going on, especially mobile device management, where central management, central policy enforcement, and so forth. And IoT is another area where securing IoT devices, securing end devices, securing controllers is also another area that we see exploding as well or coming up. Now, with these heterogeneous applications, with these different deployments, there is always challenges that come in, especially security challenges, right? And when you look at the vulnerabilities and how the hackers are trying to exploit these vulnerabilities, there's a huge increase in capturing the digital assets, especially in the dark web. We see them sold for a couple of hundreds of dollars. Based on what they have extracted for private keys and code signing certificates and all that. And there is a market for it as well. And majority of the blocked attacks are focused on SSL TLS contents and TLS certificates. If you look at the other challenges as to why there are these challenges, majority of the process in securing digital assets today is manual, and that's the reality of today, and that's what we see in every enterprise, every other enterprise that we look at. Right? They manage through a spreadsheet uh, or we call SBNs, spiral bound notebooks. So that's a technical term for doing it, with pen and paper or with an Excel. So the reason it is done that way is because of the non-standard approach, meaning there is no one uniform way to generate or manage or configure or deploy certificates across the different applications, different endpoints, and different technologies. And the other reason is because of this growth and this gradual growth, there is no visibility across the board. Right? That is another challenge, and especially with heterogeneous applications, that becomes amplified as well. And what we have seen is there are policies defined, pretty well defined policies in enterprises as to how to secure the digital assets, but then there is no way to enforce them, meaning there are policies on how and which CA that you need to access, but there's nothing preventing them from creating their own certificates, self-signed certificates, and deploying it for our lab environment. And private key access limitations, though there are controls in place or policies in place, it is not really enforced, especially when an employee leaves the company, whatever access he had, especially for the private keys, there is no mechanism to rotate them or revoke those and reissue them, depending on the level of sensitivity and the level of access that the employee had. When we look at heterogeneous environments in a typical data center, typical enterprise, we see a lot more adoption of containerized applications, Docker, Kubernetes, and all those more containerized endpoints. There is virtual appliances. There is a huge increase in the use of virtual appliances. What used to be a traditional network appliance and security appliance is now being moved to a virtual appliance. With NFV, we see a lot more of these catching up, right? So there is a huge increase in the number of virtual appliances. Right? And the traditional three-tier applications with web tier might be in the cloud, and then the business logic and the data center or the data tier being in-house with the typical deployments. And there are cases where all three are deployed in the brownfield data centers as well. So there are different. This is a broad classification, but there's a whole bunch of branches to be. When we look at these different approaches, each one requires a different way of handling things. Each one requires a different standard to enforce and implement as well. So how do we go about this challenge, right? And what we recommend is a five-step approach, right? And in the five steps, the first one is to gain visibility across all the estates. Just first understand what is there, what is in the environment. How can we get an inventory of all things that are there in the environment? And once you have the inventory, you can define the rules to protect them. Right? You know, how do you want to protect what specific groups or what specific critical assets can be protected, and what are the levels of protection as well, right? And access control. Who needs to access? Which group needs to access? How do we control access? How do you revoke them? So all that needs to be defined. And then a pretty detailed audit trail. Because these are critical assets, because these are critical uh, keys, we need to have clear auditing on what has happened in the environment. And then we need a pretty detailed report on expiry, and then the next steps that needs to be taken as well. If you look at visibility, let's go into visibility a little bit, touch deeper, right? So first thing is we should be able to scan the environment, um, or whether there should be a security tool which scans the environment, which should be consumed into a central inventory. But inevitably, there needs to be a scan run on the environment across the heterogeneous applications to identify digital assets, whether it is cloud or containerized or traditional three-tier deployments. We should be able to scan all the IPs to gather the information. Then, while discovering the certificates using a scan, we should be also able to talk to the CAs to gather all the certificates that is issued by your authorized CA so that that can be mapped to the certificates that have been discovered from the device. So that way there is one inventory which maps the device to the CA issued certificate. And then another important thing from a visibility perspective is to gather the list of devices and CIs from the ITSM and change management database that you would have and map them to the digital assets so that you have an integrated inventory with all the details, right? And that certificate inventory should have all the certificate parameters. It could be the location, the expiration, the owner, the application identifier, the application inventory, and the device mappings and the CI mappings and the cost center, all the parameters that are there to track and manage that particular digital asset. Next one is a way to run through the policies to make sure whatever we have discovered, we validate the policy and we are able to then enforce the policy based on whatever has been discovered. Now, let's touch upon how AppViewX does that. Um, Now, AppViewX has two types of discovery. One is an authenticated discovery, where you give us some way of access, either through a vault or CyberArk or some way of accessing the device with the credentials, or it could be a service account. Then you'll go talk to the device, gather all the certificates, and put it in our inventory. The other one is more unauthenticated scan, which is more of a network scan, where we could go pull the data from the network by calling through the ports and identifying the certificates. There's another way of discovery as well, where we can consume the data from other discovery tools, other security tools, which does provide a bit of insight into the certificate. So we can consume that and then we can enhance that further. And then you can schedule the task to discover however frequent you want to, or uh, once a month or once in a few months, whatnot. And the key thing is, once you discover, we are able to provide you an intuitive, holistic view, which has a single-click way of managing uh, the, the certificate digital asset um, in one place. Right? It makes it simple and intuitive. The next step is protection. You have an opportunity to, one of the key things that we need to focus on is to provide a central management. Now, it could be just the public keys, or you could have you can define a standard to have a central key escrow so that there is one central location for all the keys generated and saved so that you can quickly rotate it in case the end device gets compromised. Um, that is an option. Or you could also leverage a HSM to secure the keys, more distributed deployment, distributed HSM to secure the keys. That is another option as well. Depending on how and what your industry enterprise is in, and what policies that you want to enforce, how secure you want the assets to be in, you come up with an approach to protect it, right? And another important thing is, how can you standardize the key management? When I say standardize, the when an end user is requesting a key, requesting a certificate, requesting a digital asset, how can you make sure that there is a standard way and a standard process for the whole thing, right? And the important aspect in that is it should be simple. Right? Another one is how can we, once we have all these things set up, we should look at doing or implementing a shorter validity certificate with higher ciphers. Um, Shorter validity, once you have automated the whole process, and you can then look at implementing a shorter validity so that there is less risk from a key compromise. Now, other option is to another important aspect is to make sure this whole process is simple. Now, in security, especially enforcing security, unless we make it simple for the consumers, they will look at ways to work around it, especially in a lab or dev environment, which could cascade or snowball into production or leak into production as well. So if we have a simple and automated way for owners or for application owners to consume and deploy certificates without human access to keys, right, then they would basically leverage that process. Right? So we need to um, define that in a simple, intuitive way. The other important thing is integrate with DevOps tools so that it makes it easy for them and it is not an additional bump in the wire that they need to worry about or bump in the process that they need to worry about. And when we look at how AppViewX does this, I will touch upon this a little bit. So we have an option to leverage a software vault, or you can leverage hardware HSM. So depending on how secure you want the deployment to be, or it could be a hybrid of both as well, depending on the applications, you can select either or. And you can also define password vaults to store the passwords, then the keys, and which is used to communicate to end devices so that you can share the password using password vault. Um, the other option is you can also leverage CyberArk or other privilege access management integration so that the handoff of the access is pretty seamless and easy and secured as well. The next step is access control. One of the key things is we need to figure out a way to restrict private keys if there is any need to share that to humans. Now, we could basically limit access so that no human knows or has access to private keys. That would be a best approach. But then there are cases where they might need it, but then we need to figure out how to implement the access control and ways to generate at least the passwords for exporting the keys programmatically so that there's no one person who has access to the keys. And then if there is a need for it to be exported and leveraged, we should provide a more break the class type of utility, more like a tamper evident utility, which means that this key has been shared or exposed to somebody, which means that after that work is done, we need to revoke and reissue the certificate to secure the keys so that the moment it is exposed to a human, we reissue it and then um, secure it, right? The other one is to provide visibility. If there is a need to be exposed, if there is a need for human to access it, then we need to figure out a way how we can define controls and establish details and visibility on how it is being used. So that is another aspect of access control as well. And then again, like I mentioned earlier, we need to simplify this whole process, just like requesting protecting. They should be simplified so that it's easy to manage for the admin teams, and it's easy to manage for the application owners as well. How AppViewX does that? We provide a pretty granular access control. You can define personas. You can create and remove roles. You can give access to only specific areas, and this could be integrated with your AAA system, AD groups, Radius, whatnot, and then makes it seamless, easy to manage access to the end device. The next aspect is auditing. Is your auditing anything that happens on the device, anything that the user is triggering or doing needs to be audited, captured in a central system, whether it is a central archival system or central login system, whatever that is. Uh, and when we are capturing that, there should be a clear, detailed audit trail of all the actions on end devices or on the digital assets or accessing digital assets. And any changes needs to be notified to the respective owners on anomalies. The owners could be application owners, could be admins, and all that. And also anything that is tamper evident, like the private key access that we spoke about, those should be sent as a critical event to end users, especially in case of break the glass type of scenario, so that everybody understands that there is an incident. Now, if you look at AppViewX, how it does this, there is a way to track and audit everything that we do. Everything that you do using the GUI is sort of tracked and mapped, and you have a capability to send it to an archival tool, a central archival tool, either within or outside as well. And there are ways you can export the logs or even email the logs or email critical notifications or snippets of logs to application owners as well. There's a whole bunch of ways that you can do this from an auditing perspective. The next important thing is reporting. One is you enforce the policy, and when you enforce the policy, we need a report on how compliant the environment is, how users are consuming it, consuming the policy or deploying the policy. And we should be able to provide what is relevant to the team instead of having reporting across all the environment. How does it affect their teams and which ones are related to those teams? So that report, which is very specific to that team, we need that. And we should be able to report on vulnerabilities and risks based on what is discovered, what is captured and validated through the process. And then, most importantly, there should be an escalation matrix defined so that it can automatically go to the next level manager if the actions are not taken in the timely manner, so that there's clear accountability or clear escalation for things that was done. If you look at AppViewX, how we do that, we have a centralized dashboard which gives you can configure the dashboard to see whether you want to see compliance report, whether you want to see a policy a mapping, or you want to see a validation report on what has been accessed or what has been allowed and what has been implemented as well. It's a pretty detailed reporting capability, and you can define this reporting for the certificates that you have access to. So it's a pretty well access controlled capability there, and also relevant reports for you. So you might not care about all the other applications, but there's ways you can pull that as well if you want to. And then the whole dashboard that we present can be converted into an email or automatic reports or a PDF, whatnot, however you want that to be consumed. And within that, it's an actionable dashboard as well. You can drill down and get to the meat of it or get to the actual details that you wanted to see from that report. So it sort of makes it a more live report instead of having just like drafts presenting to the users. Another area AppViewX is working on, or rather has implemented, is low-code automation. Especially when you look at certificate, especially with the heterogeneous applications, heterogeneous deployment model, hybrid data centers, there is no silver bullet. If there is a silver bullet, if there is an easy way, standard way of doing things, this wouldn't be a problem, right? I mean, one of the bigger challenges is each vendor, each application, each component uses certificates differently. And the process to create and push and manage them is different. Now, the same thing applies to the, the deployment model or the enterprise policy or enterprise process that is different for different enterprises as well. So it sort of creates a multi-dimensional problem where one is multiple vendors, another one is multiple processes and multiple enterprises. The way we tackle that is providing you with a low code capability to automate. In other words, there is since there is no silver bullet, how much ever we add or we define a set way of doing things, enterprises might not consume that way because they might have a different way of doing it, and they might not change, or there might be resistance to change. So that's where we provide capability using low code to define your own process. So the key thing is you have a central one-stop solution for all the life cycle of it. And whether it is discovery, viewing, or granular access control, you have the capability to define a low code, low touch configuration for the flow. In other words, you don't have to have coders to go do all the stuff. We enable you to configure so that it is easier for you to define your business process, map into the product so that it could be simplified in your environment. So that is our focus on low code to enable enhanced solutions. So we'll touch upon a customer case study. This is a media company which is using our product, and they have deployed it in they've deployed so that it supports multiple vendor devices and multiple deployment models. You know, physical, brownfield, cloud, hybrid, um, virtual, uh, different ways. And there is a core group of admin users who are using those, and it is across the whole estate of it. And they provide, I mean, these admin users are the ones who manage the system, but then there is automation for end users to consume in a way using the API. Now, what does Surplus bring to the table from a business perspective? This is real customer use cases where they have seen a huge reduction in issuance time, meaning the request response time for the request that they would have related to digital assets, and reduction in deployment time, which is like 83%, which is a pretty huge number, especially when we look at these heterogeneous environments, and a way to reduce the validation time across the environment to make sure that they have the right certificates, they have right policy, and all that. So the value, when we look at the value that AppViewX provides, it is you're able to and move faster in the sense you're able to provide services quicker to your end customers, whether it's internal or external, and then provide or enforce compliance for the policies that has been defined. Remove all the manual errors that come with manual deployments, and then with that you're able to optimize the cost and able to deliver better value to your internal application owners. with that, I'll stop for questions. If you have any questions, please type it in the chat panel, and feel free to go sign up for a free trial if you want to take a test drive of AppViewX on your own, or we can help you set it up and run through the test as well. We'll wait a few minutes for the questions.
Thank you, Murli. It looks like we have a few questions. Jim asks, can Discovery identify all certificates in my infrastructure?
Yes. So to identify, the technical answer is yes. The political answer would be depending on your environment, because the security team will have to give access to uh, scan all the networks and all the devices. Only then we would be able to pull all the certificates in the environment. So if there is already a precursor of using some other security tool to scan the environment, Rapid7, Palace, whatever, whatnot, we could consume the data from there and then add to it, or depending on the security team's access, because especially when we look at Dockers and all that, there could be private subnets that they are deployed in, which might not be exposed or even routed externally. So we'll have to look at how we can deploy in those environments to scan and then gather all the certificates.
Okay, I hope that answers your question, Jim. So we have another question here. How do I ensure safety of my key escrow in case I don't have an HSM?
Yeah, so HSM is the best way to secure. I mean, it's a hardware security module, right? If you want to secure it with the hardware, that's the only way. If you're looking at you know, especially hybrid data centers, if you want to secure it, if HSM is not an option, or if it doesn't make sense to deploy a HSM for your application, but you still want to secure it, there are different software vaults that you can deploy, or you can leverage AppViewX software vault to integrate and then consume that as well. So yeah, I mean, it is pretty secure. It is pretty secure in the sense, at the end of the day, it is software, right? So you can basically carry the software with you, not the hardware, especially if it is if you're trying to extract it remotely. But then, even though you carry the software, you wouldn't be able to decrypt it or use it. But then there's a potential that you can take the copy the software over. So that's the only challenge. But other than that, it's pretty safe.
Thank you, Michael, for that question. We have Alex asking here that do you integrate with DevOps tools for certificate enrollment?
Yes. So in our customers, each customers use different set of tools. Jenkins, Puppet, Chef, Ansible, um, Kubernetes, depending on whatever you would use to Terraform, right? So a whole bunch of DevOps tools, and we are able to integrate with it. And we've had different deployments in different customers based on that.
Okay, I hope that answers your question, Alex. So we also have a couple of questions on the recording. So yes, we will be sending the recording to you once it is available. I think that wraps up. We don't have any more questions from our side. So Murli, is there anything else you want to add to this presentation?
No, I think that's good. Thanks everyone. Thank you for joining the session. Apologize for the initial hiccups. Look forward to talking to you in future. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. As mentioned earlier, if you would like to have a hands-on experience with our product, please register for a free trial at the given link. And for more information on our other solutions, please visit us at www.appux.com, or you could also mail us at info@appux.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.